Beyond repair, sheep shortages ahead of Australia's live export ban leave countries scrambling for supply. Hello, I'm Amy Culpitt. This is Regional News. Caught between a rock and a hard place, the unbelievable mountain rescue that saved a woman's life. Time's up, the 3G network is cut off around the country. And passing on the torch, a new generation takes on the challenge of one of the loneliest jobs on the planet. Exports of live sheep by ship to the Middle East are winding down ahead of the federal government's commitment to ban the trade by 2028. After 50 years of business with Australia, the downturn is forcing livestock importers in Kuwait to turn to other countries for live sheep, including South Africa.
An average of about 700,000 sheep have been exported live from Australia to the Middle East every year for the past 5 years. But with Australia set to ban live exports in 2028, that number is starting to fall. And that's worrying importers in our biggest export market.
It's very disturbing for us to end the business like that. We don't want to end up with a shortage of protein in this country, and we have to explore our new markets. We open South Africa, but not as efficient as Australia.
The federal government is now offering support for farmers affected by the phase-out of live export, worth almost $140 million. In a statement, the Agriculture Minister, Julie Collins, said $27 million of the package is earmarked to enhance demand within Australia and internationally for Australian sheep products, including in Kuwait. While global demand for boxed meat from Australia is on the rise, the demand in Kuwait is for live sheep.
I'm doing now too from Australia, but the demand is not much at all because the people they needed it to be fresh.
Although public concern about the treatment of sheep on board export ships has contributed to the decision to ban the trade, industry representatives fear global standards for animal welfare will fall without Australia in the market.
If we take ourselves out of the international market where there is demand for live animals, we are removing ourselves from the impact that we can have internationally on animal welfare.
With live sheep exports from Australia already on the downturn, Kuwaiti importers are now scrambling to find a replacement for live sheep to meet growing demand in the Middle East before the ban comes into force. Sophie Johnson, ABC News.
It's not only the live export trade that's been hit by the looming bans. A decline in sheep numbers has the wool industry impacted as well. And while a career in wool is still attracting young recruits to the industry, older workers are worried about what the future will hold for the trade that has produced wealth and careers for generations.
Throwing the fleece on the table, a skill learnt by generations of shed hands. 17-year-old Darcy King is a novice wool handler. She's one of many competing teenagers hoping their abilities will grow into a career in wool.
I feel like I would definitely have something in the agriculture and sheep industry, but yeah, because I've been growing up my whole life in the sheep industry, but don't really know, see where it takes me.
While a life in wool is still attracting young recruits, the West Australian sheep industry is battling to remain viable. Wool, a long-time staple of farm income, is suffering collateral damage from the end of the live sheep trade.
Lots of farmers are stopping their livestock and just going straight to crop. So it means less shearers that are needed, less jobs.
Experienced wool workers are worried what the future will hold for the trade, which has supported country towns for generations.
Talking to farmers in the last month, there's a lot of people still getting out of sheep. They're just, with the live export and the price of wool, it's not viable to farm sheep at the moment in WA. Like it's very hard.
But despite the downturn, there's still optimism the wool industry will continue to create employment opportunities.
We're trying to create pathways for younger people to come in and take it on as a full-time job, not just a seasonal work. We really want to make this a career.
There's always a future for any good shearer. That's the same as wool handlers. I think in general the quality of shearing will pick up around the place as well.
The national competition moves to South Australia next year. Mike Bennett, ABC News, Katanning.
While many farmers are doing it tough, a small town on the New South Wales-Queensland border is booming thanks to a spectacular harvest. With near-record crops, Mungandai is celebrating the good times.
As the sun rises, harvesters are already hard at work. They're going day and night to get as much of the winter grain off as possible. Consistent rainfall has led to a standout season.
It's a fantastic year and the yields are really good, and harvest has been relatively smooth so far.
A successful harvest isn't just good for growers, it also helps the local community. Mungandai had just over 600 residents at the last census, but that number explodes with out-of-town labour this time of year.
Looking at our keg usage back in drought, we'd do 6 kegs, maybe 6 a week, whereas now we're doing upwards of 35.
From the cafes to the servos and local agronomy businesses, everyone is busy during harvest time.
You know, there are people about, there's money to be spent, the community is really benefiting from the good season that we've had.
Not everywhere has been as lucky as these farms. Frost is expected to knock out more than 1 million tonnes of grain across southern New South Wales, South Australia and Victoria. That means that here in northern New South Wales, they're doing the heavy lifting, with growers working long hours to get grain in the silos.
The chickpea yields are fantastic, up near the record yields we've had, and the wheat's up near the record yields we've had on this farm.
In the past 5 years, Mungandai has seen drought, COVID-19 border restrictions and its only supermarket burned down. But 2024 is looking like a year to remember, for the better.
To see everyone have a crop, like the town's alive.
With summer on the way, everyone's hoping the good luck continues for the next lot of crops. Lara Webster, ABC News, Mungandai.
A woman has been found alive after almost 2 weeks missing in the New South Wales Snowy Mountains. Lavisa Schuberg was found dazed and injured by a park ranger in Kosciuszko National Park this week. Teams of emergency workers began searching for the 48-year-old after a car hire company told police she failed to return a rental car. The photographer has told police she was bitten by a copperhead snake around 4 days before being found. Paramedics treated the woman at the scene before taking her to hospital. Police say the operation had the best possible outcome.
She's in fact very fortunate to be alive, and we're glad that she is. She obviously went through a tough time.
Now to another tale of survival, and this one is unbelievable. Matilda Campbell was trying to retrieve her phone in the Hunter Valley when she fell headfirst between boulders and became wedged upside down for 7 hours. Lillian Watkins reports.
It was the impossible rescue
That's what I'm saying, this could be pushed over.
that made headlines around the world.
Rescuers in Australia had to work for hours to free a young woman who wound up stuck, wedged upside down between boulders.
Yeah, you can just see her feet there.
I mean, this story is just unbelievable.
But it was the scary reality for Matilda Campbell trying to retrieve her phone.
About like an hour in, when they first come in, I had already noticed that the graze on my side was starting to hurt, because that was the side that I was laying down on. And there was sticks in my hair, there was dirt everywhere, like I could see spiders in the distance.
The 23-year-old's friends called emergency services, who came in droves.
Nice work, guys.
Probably towards the more halfway mark, I was like, oh, I'm not getting out. I haven't said goodbye to anyone. I haven't said I love you to my family. But then through, I don't know what I was thinking, I just somehow knew that I would be okay from like the team.
Crews had to remove 7 boulders, each weighing between 80 and 500 kilograms, to gain access to Miss Campbell. A wooden frame was built above her to prevent rocks from falling.
I'm 30 years with VRA, and there's been a lot of difficult rescues in that time, but never someone down in the crevice of a rock that's wedged upside down 2 metres down. No, that was a first for me, for sure. The fact that somebody was there with her to raise the alarm, that's what saved her life.
After 3 days in hospital, Miss Campbell was finally able to thank her saviours.
Wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for them, so I'm really, really thankful. Phones are replaceable, but your life isn't. So I would never, ever, ever go into a dangerous place trying to get your phone.
A lesson learnt the hard way. Lillian Watkins, ABC News, Rutherford.
Residents in Broken Hill have been forced to rely on emergency power this week as the effort to restore power to the New South Wales Far West continues. There's been ongoing outages since a severe storm damaged the local supply network last month. Supplier Transgrid says 7 temporary electricity towers have been erected. A backup generator and battery has provided some stability. Authorities are urging people to cut down their electricity use after sunset to avoid blackouts. A woman has been taken to hospital after a car ploughed through the front of a bakery in Goolwa, South Australia this week. Several customers and staff were inside the Live and Let Pie bakery when a car crashed through the shop front. A 62-year-old customer was pinned between the shop's counter by the car and was taken to hospital with non-life-threatening leg injuries. Abortion is a legal right across the country, but doctors fear an unspoken ban is robbing rural and regional women of the right to choose. An ABC investigation has revealed patients are being denied equitable access due to a range of reasons, including ideological positions, unclear guidelines, and a lack of government funding.
Reflective but still reeling. Melissa's carefully planned surgical abortion was upended by a phone call just hours before she was due to be admitted to hospital.
He just basically said, "I'm really sorry, we can't do the procedure today." I was broke down. I was like, "What do you mean you can't? What is that? Where does that leave me?"
On the phone was her obstetrician.
I could tell he was baffled by the whole situation and he didn't understand why it hadn't happened.
Melissa's surgical termination was meant to be performed here at Queanbeyan District Hospital in southern New South Wales. Her baby had severe life-limiting malformations. This hospital had performed the same procedure under similar circumstances before. But the ABC can reveal that since Melissa's experience, the hospital suddenly stopped providing surgical terminations for fetal anomalies and medical reasons. Melissa's GP says there's been no explanation of the late cancellation, despite repeated requests to the local health district. She fears an ideological opposition to abortion could ultimately be behind it.
It feels like you're shadowboxing, that there's a pushback and you're not really sure why, and that's very frustrating.
The local health district says it supports women to access abortion services, including medical termination of pregnancy. Doctors are calling it an unspoken ban. In Orange, the local members also seeking answers after the hospital there stopped providing abortions for non-medical reasons.
This is something that's permitted under law. It's a public health institution.
The local health district that oversees Orange has confirmed it is sending women seeking abortions for non-medical reasons to private providers or family planning.
The power lies with the Minister and with the Health Department. And it's really important that they ensure that this essential healthcare is delivered.
Melissa eventually had a medical abortion at her local hospital. Ultimately, though, she was denied the right to choose. Lucy Barber, ABC News, Queanbeyan.
The push to build in more regional areas is a key plan for many governments looking to meet the demand on housing in the coming years. But in many rural areas, critical infrastructure like water and sewerage simply aren't available to support those developments. Now, developers in regional Victoria are warning that if the money isn't put up to connect water, thousands of planned homes won't be built.
When Lauren Palmer and her young family moved into a new home in the northeast Victorian town of Tangambalanga, the lack of water pressure became an instant problem.
When the pressure's bad, so especially in summer, in that sort of evening time when everyone's getting tea ready, it's terrible.
The expensive sprinkler system they had installed barely works. She's had to buy a new washing machine that runs on low water pressure, and the bath took so long to fill they stopped using it.
So we've given up on that entirely and the bath's now used as storage.
Now the future of her new community is uncertain.
Building in this Tangambalanga estate has come to the end of the road.
This street should be leading to at least 200 new homes. But without the guarantee of adequate water and sewerage infrastructure, construction has quite literally come to a dead end.
We could have substantially developed the balance of the estate over that period of time if we'd had the appropriate water infrastructure here.
Water infrastructure issues are putting a halt on crucial housing developments across the region. A 10-minute drive away in Leneva, this paddock is ready to house 400 new homes, and developers say they could build thousands more. But those plans are on hold.
We're ready to go here in terms of we've got an approved development plan. We don't have the pipes to connect to.
The need for more pipes here has been known by council and state agencies for years, but the water corporations charged with providing them simply don't have the money to do so.
I think we would say that there needs to be more funding for critical infrastructure, particularly for the next 10 years to cater for growth.
These estates are a crucial part of the state government's target of building 800,000 homes in a decade. It approved an emergency increase in some water corporations' debt caps last year and says it remains on track to deliver its promise.
This is work that will continue with the Planning Minister, with local councils and of course on the really important issues of essential infrastructure.
But developers don't share in that confidence.
The only way these problems can be resolved in any sort of reasonable time frame is for state government to step up and provide extra funding to enable the infrastructure to be developed.
Lauren Palmer just wants to see her new neighbourhood grow.
Until they can fix the water issue, I don't see it happening.
Erin Somerville, ABC News, Tangambalanga.
Australia's 3G network is officially over. This week, Telstra and Optus began switching off the service after Vodafone and TPG did it months ago. Many were prepared for the shutdown, but others were not, and it's regional areas most impacted.
You say goodbye, and I say hello.
2 decades after saying hello to 3G, the nation is now saying goodbye.
Australia's remaining 3G networks will close from 28 October.
The 3G network is just not fit for purpose. So that's the main reason we're shutting it down. We're going to repurpose it for 5G, which means that we can roll out 5G much more efficiently and quicker.
Many in regional Australia have been upgrading their infrastructure for months or even years.
I've actually surveyed a few businesses today, and a few of them actually said, oh, didn't that already happen? So I think they're pretty prepared.
The shutdown is happening in a staged process around the country. 3G users will first lose access to calls and data, and eventually even 000 calls will be blocked. The government says there are programs in place to give free replacement phones to vulnerable people. Smartwatches, security systems and personal medical alarms that use the 3G network will also be affected.
Family members and neighbours will need to remind elderly people in particular that they should be looking at their telephone coverage and seeing if their telephone is up to date.
Some in rural areas aren't sold on the promise of faster speeds when black spots remain.
Supposedly I have coverage, but you can't make a call with no bars. It just drops out, which is fine if you're within the area of the house, but outside of that, no calls. So that's where I'll get a bit worried about my safety out in the farm.
We said that we would not shut down 3G until we provided complete equivalence of coverage to 3G. And we've done that.
Telstra and Optus say customers can reach out if they need support in making the shift. Adrian Reardon, ABC News.
The uptake of green technology like electric vehicles and wind turbines is driving a push to source key materials in Australia. But the potentially lucrative economic opportunity has also revived an old debate about the impact of mining rich farming lands.
South Australia's limestone coast is one of the state's agricultural powerhouses. But for Ken Turner, his mixed farming property has attracted the interest of mining companies hunting for rare earth elements.
They believe there are viable quantities of mineral under the ground here.
Mr Turner's property lies within a 20 square kilometre area earmarked for potential mining. The fledgling Coppermurra project is part of a wave of development aimed at digging up the rare earth elements needed to build electric vehicles and wind turbines.
We see a great opportunity for Australia to develop the rare earth industry. It's a potential to provide jobs and investment.
Most of the world's rare earths come from China, but the push is on to develop a local industry to supply Australia's trading partners.
So I see South Australia's role is actually potentially being that trusted, secure supply of these resources.
The environmental credentials of the Copper project are still being assessed, and any potential mining here is still several years away. But local producers are concerned about the potential impacts on this rich agricultural land. An opposition group, chaired by farmer Todd Woodard, is concerned about how any future mine here would be rehabilitated.
Getting the macro minerals back in there, the phosphorus and that sort of thing is one thing. Putting the biology back in there is completely different.
While Ken Turner shares some of the group's concerns, he's waiting for more information.
We value our soils, we value our water, we value the environment we live in, so we will be looking very closely when they have a proposal.
A critical issue for Australia's food and financial security. Josh Bryan, ABC News, Rattenbully.
Being a lighthouse keeper might seem like one of the loneliest jobs in the world. But for the caretaker of the beacon in Gabe Island off the coast of East Gippsland in Victoria, it's been a labour of love. However, after 25 years, the time has come for Leo Optenbrow to pass the torch on to a new generation.
It's an island full of life, but it's only ever been home to a lucky few.
I'm only one page in a 150-year-old history book.
Yeah, hi Peter.
Leo Optenbrow has spent a quarter of a century caring for Gabo Island and its famous lighthouse.
Well, we're sort of stuck out in the ocean, so we see a lot of marine life.
Leo's companions include whales, sea eagles, and one of the world's largest colonies of little penguins.
When I first came here, there were up to 30,000 pairs and very few seals. And more recent years, it's dropped right down. Penguin numbers are greatly reduced, maybe 10,000 or so, and the seal population has increased significantly.
Leo has loved life on the island, including the isolation, but it's time to hand over the keys.
I feel sort of sad to be leaving the place because I thought I'd be here till they dragged me off kicking or screaming or in a box. But time moves on and got this young bloke who's pretty interested and very keen.
That young bloke is Sandy Duthie, and he's well aware of the historic role he's taken on.
I'm hoping eventually to find a beautiful rhythm to tie in with Gable's rhythm. There's a huge responsibility and a lot of it is self-driven.
A burden of responsibility that he says is also a blessing.
I kind of had this dream of if this job ever came up, I was definitely applying for it. And I've been so lucky and feel very privileged to have this job now.
The Gabo Island Lighthouse has been a constant beacon for the local community for almost 2 centuries. And it's the job now of a new generation of caretakers to preserve this landmark and this island for the future.
Well, the island to me is a really important part of Australian non-Indigenous history, and I'd like to see it kept in good order and accessible to the average Australian.
I'm really passionate about the history. I think that's the stuff that's really important.
A legacy to honour. Fiona Broom, ABC News.
King Charles headed home from Australia this week with a special gift from the capital. A woodworking artist from Bungendore, east of Canberra, was commissioned by the Department of Defence to handcraft a box that was presented to the monarch at the Sydney Opera House. Reporter Lish Fayer and producer Don Shiel have the story.
I'm Scott Mitchell. I've been a woodworker for a long time, and today I'm working on a box. Well, it's a pretty flash little box. It's going to house a nice glass plate, and it will be a gift for King Charles. A box fit for a king, I hope. If we close it up to start with, there's his new cipher, which includes Charles Rex III, his crown, as opposed to the late Queen's crown, which is quite a different shape. So this is one of the first times this has been put together. On the inside of the lid, our Australian states and territories floral emblems are shown, and the golden wattle, which is our national emblem, in the middle. So what I chose is Tasmanian bird's eye hewn pine, rather old. I believe this particular stock's around 2,000 years old. I have a small stash. and Victorian fiddleback blackwood. I mean, everyone knows he spent some time in Victoria a long time ago when he was at school at Timbertop. So he'd certainly be aware of a few of the Australian native species, I'm sure. He takes quite an interest in nature from what I gather. So I think he'll get a real buzz out of seeing a few of the territories and states' emblems. Yeah, it's a big deal. I mean, it's a very important piece. It serves a ceremonial purpose. So it was a pretty nice conversation when they confirmed that I was going to make a box for King Charles. He'll probably spend a bit of time in the dark somewhere and then come out at the right time, I hope. Not just under the royal bed with all the other presents.
Halloween is becoming increasingly popular in Australia, with more families taking on the American tradition of indulging in ghoulish dress-ups and sweet treats. But in the far north of Western Australia, there's a small town whose original purpose was to support a United States military outpost, and they have a decades-long tradition of ghostly gatherings.
In Exmouth, Halloween is part of a long-standing tradition.
I've never really thought much of Halloween at all, living down in Perth previously.
We're very lucky that the US folk put it on.
The community turned out in force for haunted house festivities held by the Learmonth Solar Observatory. Behind all the fun, memories dating back decades.
My mother was the captain's secretary for many years. The majority of the town was actually employed by the American Naval Base, so the Department of Defence.
Exmouth was founded in the late 60s to support a US Navy communications station.
The culture was entirely different to what it is now. We actually used to celebrate Halloween, Independence Day or July 4th, Thanksgiving.
The US now has a smaller presence in Exmouth.
So the solar observatory we work at, our primary mission is to observe the sun. It keeps your lights on, it keeps your planes flying.
The observatory staff team up with local volunteers to help keep Halloween alive, or undead.
Whether you're scared in the haunted house or not, most people walk away with good memories of it, and that's just what I associate with a lot of my childhood, and now carrying this tradition on here in the town of Exmouth.
This year's event had hundreds of locals lining up late into the night. While some were caught off guard by what they saw inside, others reckon this remote town has the best haunted house in Australia.
I think it's the best because they put so much effort into it.
Probably I wouldn't go in again, and it was basically just scary.
The ghosts of an American past out for a fright to remember. Alistair Bates, ABC News, Exmouth.
And that's the latest regional news. I'm Amy Culpitt. Thanks for your company. We'll see you next time.